I'm doing my Friday show a bit early today because I had gotten up early, so I figured I'll go ahead and just do it now. Um, I'm noticing there's a lot of narratives that are going on out there, and I'm going to say that the best thing you can do as it relates to media these days is to learn about facts and figures and use that as your frame of reference. And by frame of reference, I mean uh, a solid foundation upon which you can stand to thereby be able to do your own fact checking of all of these different narratives that continually come out day after day after day after day. And a friend of mine, shared something that, you know, I found sort of, mm, well, a little off. I mean, nothing against it's nothing against my friend. He's outstanding. He's a great guy. Has an awesome channel, but I noticed that there's always a lot of things being said about China and Russia. And do keep in mind that because we are in a time of a proxy conflict, which basically insinuates that through the proxy, we are having a conflict almost directly because we are providing arms to go against not just Russia, but also China through providing the land of Taiwan with arms as well. And do keep in mind that there is a lot of things happening behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't privy to. Uh, and all we really have to go off of is facts and figures, but also we have to combine our knowledge of those things with what we see on the surface. And the best thing you can do with what you see on the surface is learn how to read between the lines. Um, do keep in mind that there is basically coming a point in time that we're moving towards where the Western world, is becoming ever more hostile against China. Now, of course, you know that I can't stand China, I can't stand Russia, but equally so, I cannot stand the West because it is evil. All of these power blocks are evil, and evil often destroys other evil. But we haven't come to the point just yet whereby one evil block of elites has completely destroyed the other. Now, what I seen was that something was said about China that just isn't true. China's going down, and that's impossible considering that China is the single biggest holder of gold on the face of the earth. They could literally never collapse at that point because literally all they have to do, being the biggest holder of the world's gold, the biggest single holder of it, would be to back their currency with the enormous, freakishly massive quantity of gold with which they possess, which actually is officially declared at 6,400 tons. But there are independent financial analysts who believe that China has actually, in fact, more than that. But the official figure is 6,400 tons of gold, which is enormous. It's massive. Also, you have to keep in mind as well that China is working out the final deal with Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia is the largest currently exporter of oil. And of course, China's already worked out their oil dealings with Iran, which is now a close Chinese ally as well as a Russian ally, and they're basically pulling Saudi Arabia into the fold, because the next step is a petro yuan renminbi, and they will get all of the same benefits from a petro yuan renminbi as we at one time had acquired through the petrodollar. And when they dethrone the dollar through pulling Saudi into the fold, which they will, it'll be the end of the petrodollar, and the American economy will be toast. It'll collapse virtually overnight. And many nations have been setting up for that very day for a long time. Now, any time that the financial as well as economic balance of power shifts dramatically, nations, respective towards that, have to make sure that they cushion themselves accordingly, because there's always turmoil. There's always turmoil when things do end up shifting dramatically. Now, keep in mind that China has the single biggest industrial base on the face of the entire earth. At 40%, 40% of the entire world's industrial base sits in that one nation, in that single nation. 40%. Now, the whole purpose of the whole Eurasian bloc is to basically cut off the West, once and for all. They're setting things up. They're building things up to where they can just decouple from the West, and they can trade amongst themselves only, and therefore be able to seamlessly transition from a economy that's global to an economy that's more relegated to just their single block, their economic, financial, and military block, the Eastern Bloc, the Eurasian Bloc, if you will, whatever you want to call it. Because there are two different power blocks, and they've been, for the time at least, for a while, they have been united in a single global economy. Now, it doesn't matter. China doesn't need America to buy their goods, because once they have fully integrated all the economies of the East and of the developing world, which China, through their Belt and Road Initiative, have come to dominate, that will make up for not having the same volume of trade with the West as they will have once had before. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying that China, when they finally decouple from the West, from Western Europe and North America, they will have all of the nations of the developing world, as well as all the nations of the East, to shift all of their sales of their products to their products that they produce in their massive industrial base. They will basically no longer need any kind of fiat paper, because the dynamics are changing and things are moving away from fiat currencies to more of commodities. If you have commodities, or if you have products, if you have real physical, tangible things, you thereby have real wealth with which you can actually conduct trade. See, that's the whole basis of where the Eastern world is moving its economic methodology towards. They're moving away from the concept of fiat printed money to one where commodities and products will reign supreme. And a nation will only be worth whatever it can produce in the sense of commodities or in the sense of products that are manufactured or what have you. Whatever they can produce physically will be the measure of their wealth in that sort of an economy. So, what I'm saying is it's literally impossible for a nation like China to have a real issue in terms of like economic or financial issues because they alone have this ginormous manufacturing industrial base that produces real products. And same goes for Russia. The reason why the sanctions boomeranged on Russia is because Russia holds all these commodities and they have China, who is more than willing to buy those commodities to use through their industrial base to produce their manufactured goods. Besides that, one of the commodities that Russia has, well, really two, is natural gas and oil. And realistically, because green energy is a flop, it's bunk, it's BS. They everybody is still going to always need oil. And now that you have these developing economies springing up, you have nations in what they call the global south, South America, Africa, Asia. You have all of these nations, these developing nations, and they need oil and natural gas to power their economic growth. So nations are always going to need those resources. They're always going to need those resources. Russia is not Syria. Russia is not Iraq. Russia is not Afghan. It's not any small nation. It's a developed nation. Yes, they have industry too, but it's nothing on the scale of China's, but they have industries, but what they have a lot of is commodities. So the boomeranging of the sanctions hurt the nations that depended on Russian resources in Western Europe. Primarily, it hurt them. But Russia, they just shifted all those sales to the east, to China. And China was more than happy to purchase those commodities. As was Pakistan and India and other nations as well. I mean, there's nations also in Africa that purchase foodstuffs, just food in general, just the wheat and everything else from Russia. They need their oil, they need their other resources because those are developing nations. And China, through Belt and Road, has come to politically dominate many of those nations who failed to pay back their Belt and Road projects, which China has used to get a leg up on many nations to be able to station their troops there, whether openly or whether through stealth, like what they're doing here, where, yes, you may not see them in uniform, but on CCP properties, they most certainly have their equipment, their uniforms, everything they need for when the time comes to invade the United States, because it is going to happen. It is going to happen. So the purpose of getting off of SWIFT and onto CIPS for China was to create their own financial transaction messaging system to therefore conduct trade within their own bloc. Same reason why Russia made the FSPS. They've been kicked off of SWIFT. Although China's technically still on it, it won't matter if they get kicked off because there's apparently already been different levels of sanctions that have been put on China, and apparently that's going to escalate. But China has prepared for it because they've already seen what happened to Russia. So this is just pushing them that much further into the decoupling with the West. And when, as the saying goes, when goods and services no longer cross borders, armies do. Armies do. So take that to heart. Keep that in mind at all times. Remember, when goods and services no longer cross borders, armies do. So, when the final decoupling takes place between the East and the West, that is when the West is going to be destroyed, full on, full on. And that is when your 10 victorious Eastern kings of Revelation will arise, and then they will give their power to the beast and reign with the beast for 1 hour, like it says in Revelations. These are going to be Eastern kings, because keep in mind, you have to understand that China and Russia and other Eastern nations have been busy building themselves up. They're not playing games with this green energy stuff like has been going on in the West. They're not doing any of this woke stuff, this, basically emasculating their own people. They're not doing all of this stuff. They're not. They're not. And, that is something that the Western Economic Forum has been basically pushing. And China, although they might attend certain global meetings, that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that by any stretch of the imagination that they're in bed with the Western elites. In fact, far from it. They only collaborate on things when it seeks to benefit themselves. If it doesn't benefit them, then they won't take any part in anything, because it's all about greed and lust for power and control. These people don't give a damn about one another. They could care less about one another. They only care about themselves, and they will do whatever it takes to get to the top. Sort of like how China played the United States and the West for so many years, also that they could get concessions to use to build up their own indigenous capabilities, to build up themselves, to make themselves more powerful, because they made the necessary sacrifices and they played the long game. They conducted enormous amounts of industrial, economic, academic, and military espionage to steal all the crown jewels from the West that they thereby could use to build themselves up into the world superpower we see today, called China. They don't care about the West. They don't care about the elites of the West. They could care less. In fact, one day they'll be pulling those people out of their DUMBs and humiliating them in the same way we did it to Saddam when we pulled Saddam Hussein out of his hidey hole. It'll be the same concept. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, they must be shadow banning this already. I only have 6 people in here and 2 likes. It's funny. Oh, man. But yeah, so that's all going to be coming. And people are not ready for it at all. People think that these Western elites are going to be the main power brokers when they couldn't be more wrong. There's going to be a lot of surprises coming in the future that people are not ready for. People just have no idea. And these sissified pansy Western elites, these snot-nosed elites, they're going to get humiliated. They're going to basically just they're going to be the slaves for the likes of the 10 Eastern kings, like especially Xi Jinping or Putin or the others. They're going to humiliate those people, because you have to understand, for the beast to even become the beast, the 10 kings have to give their power to the beast. Now, real power comes from having armies. It comes from having industrial might. It comes from having financial might. It doesn't come from psyops that try to convince people that, these Western elites run everything. That's not where real power comes from. No, real power comes from real tangible things like armies and economic power, industrial power, financial power. That's where it comes from. And China is a nation that has 40% of the world's industries. It has the biggest single military on the face of the earth and the most powerful, the most technologically advanced now that they've stolen technology that helped them basically progress by leaps and bounds to build themselves and to create their own indigenous capabilities to where they are today, where they've now learned what they needed from the West, and now they have fine tuned things and perfected things to surpass the West, to thereby destroy it at a later date. Now, they're going to wait. They're going to wait until we have collapsed and had our internal conflict because they want their occupation and colonization to be therefore carried out as easily as is possible. They don't want to have to fight a humongous counterinsurgency campaign in a land that is some 300 million, 700 and something thousand square miles. It's enormous. So they're going to allow a collapse, and they're going to allow an internal conflict to take place so that all the best and most experienced people of this country annihilate each other, so that they don't have to expend the money, the resources. They can go straight into exploiting their gains and strip mining this place, not only of its physical resources, but also of its human capital, too, because of all the money that they can make from the organ harvesting trade, their state-sanctioned sex trade of American women, basically their manual labor, their forced labor trade. I mean, it's going to be like how the National Socialists in Germany exploited the peoples of Eastern Europe, where they conquered massive swathes of territory in Eastern Europe. It'll be the same thing here, but it'll be the Chi-Coms doing it. So, people have to understand that the Chinese, the Russians, and the other 8 of the 10 Eastern kings who will be victorious in World War III and give their power to the beast, you have to understand the beast system is not going to rise without a massive, enormous, destructive, deadly type of cataclysm, such as a third world war. The beast cannot rise, the 10 kings can't rise until that's happened. And the 10 kings are going to be the victorious Eastern kings, because the West does not win World War III. The elites of the East prevail in World War III, and they destroy and occupy and colonize the Western world, because the West has become decadent, it's become weak, it's become lazy, it's become incompetent, it's become inept, and just basically has ripped itself apart. You can't win a war like that. You cannot win a war when you lack the will to even basically be prepared for such a thing. I mean, we're not prepared industrially, we're not prepared economically, we're not prepared financially, we're not prepared militarily. We will get annihilated in a third world war. So will Western Europe especially. They're not ready whatsoever at all. At all. So the nations of the East are going to prevail with their elites who are in their regimes, because the elites are they who control the currencies. They who control the issuing of monies, of currencies. And in the East, that is the regimes. It's not, their central banks are not privatized like those in the West, where they have private ownership and oversight. No, in the East, it's the regimes who control the issuance of their currencies. So that means that the elites of those of that side of the world are within those regimes themselves, because they control their own central banks. India does, China does, Russia does. They have total and complete control over their central banks and the issuance of their currencies. So Using basically obvious deductive reasoning, and it's too obvious. It's too obvious. Using obvious deductive reasoning, we can deduce correctly, 100% correctly, that the West is going to lose the Third World War. Okay? They are. They cannot stand up to a nation that outproduces us in everything that even matters. They can't stand up to a nation that has the world's single biggest gold holdings, that has the world's single biggest industrial base, that has the world's single biggest population. Yes, India's catching up, but China is still the world's biggest. And basically the world's single biggest, most technologically advanced, most powerful armed forces on the face of the earth. Biggest military industrial complex out of their entire industrial base, of course. So how then are we going to be the winners of that conflict? Oh, and they have the most modernized nuclear arsenal. They don't have to have the biggest, they just have to have enough to get the job done, and it has to all work, which theirs does. They're beyond just regular hypersonics. They've moved on to fractional orbital bombardment systems. They can cloak their missiles. They can do all kinds of things, and they don't even need to use nukes. They have other high-tech weaponry, directed energy, lasers. Of course, they have their cyber capabilities. Insanely powerful cyber capabilities. They have the best cyber warfare program on the face of the earth. They have dumped enormous funding into that. It's a large cyber warfare wing that they possess in China. They also in their military, and they also have the most advanced electronic warfare capabilities aside with Russia. Besides just Russia, aside with Russia, China also has the world's most advanced electronic warfare capabilities. So, and of course, hypersonics, fractional orbital bombardment, like I just said, but you there's other technologies as well, but you just take all of the stuff I just even mentioned and you integrate it all into a cohesive way to wage war, and you have a situation like in all of my invasion work where they use their potent, tried and true, tested and true anti-satellite weapons mixed with cyber warfare, because everything in the West is tied to the grid, tied to the internet. The grid is tied to the internet, so everything in the West is arrayed in that type of way. So they use their anti-satellite weapons to gouge out our proverbial eyes, and then they shut off the grid because it's all connected to the internet. Anything that's connected to the internet can be hacked, absolutely. With their phenomenally potent cyber warfare capabilities, then as a redundancy, then of course you have their electronic warfare capabilities to jam any types of redundant systems because they know all the frequencies that we use. So integrating all of that stuff together, combined with their conventional weapons, they'll be, and I include hypersonics with conventional warheads in that category, but they can use all of those weapons to basically annihilate our war-making capabilities within a matter of a few whole days. I mean, just like in my work, it only took them 4 whole days to subdue this country. It's also because of the doctrines, the war-making doctrines that they use with their Trojan horse shock armies inside of our country, combined with their external forces that roll in from Canada and Mexico. They beach land and they parachute in if they're airborne units. So they act as the heavy-handed reinforcements for all the Trojans that are already inside this country on CCP properties in every corner of this nation. They would subdue this place in a matter of a few days, several days. It would all be over. So their phenomenal levels of technology, very potent war-making technologies, integrated within their plans, their doctrines of fourth-generation warfare, also called hybrid warfare, you can easily see now why the West, how the West was won, like the old Western movies, how the West was won. Well, the East is going to master the West in a third world war, and they're going to dominate it. And the elites that are going to rule the world are not the same elites that most people in the West think of. They're not going to be these snotty, uber-rich European and North American elites. No, no, no. They're going to be Eastern elites, i.e. the 10 kings of Revelation, rulers of Eastern nations who prevail over the West in a third world war to bring about the beast system. That's who is going to be the masters of the world in the future. You know, most people who live in the West cannot comprehend that. You know, like I said, I couldn't give a damn about either one, these Eastern or Western elites, because I don't hold any allegiance to any political entity on any map anywhere. On any map of the world, I don't hold allegiances to any sort of political entity on any world map. So I'm unbiased. But I know enough that I know what I see and I know what I've researched to be true. To be true. It is going to happen that way. It will happen that way. Because I've done my homework on all of these issues. I know, and I know what I see. I know what I see. I know what I've researched. And I've researched real facts and figures, capabilities, statistics, numbers, the whole nine. And I know how it comes together when you basically take all the data, you analyze all the data, and you combine it all together. I know what type of big picture it forms. And it forms the picture of basically the work that I've compiled. And if you go look through all my past live streams, whether they're the miscellaneous ones or whether they're the Friday ones, I painstakingly go through all the details of how I arrived at what I've arrived at when it comes to creating the presentations, the hypotheticals that I've created, and why they happen like that, and why they happen like that, and how they happen like that. I painstakingly go over all the details as to why that is. See, a lot of people who want to, basically present a picture to others, a lot of people don't, they don't have the tendency to do such things where they actually explain how they arrived at the conclusions they've arrived at. But I make it a point to do that, which is why I have so many very long live streams. Not just the work that I created, like the hypotheticals, but I have all these different live streams, these miscellaneous and Friday shows, to actually explain it to people so that they can see how I arrived at that. I even compare notes with the Bible. None of the work that I've made on this channel conflicts with anything that's in the Bible, because I make it a point to show how the things are going to look that are in the Bible. That's why I do what I do. I want to show people what's coming, what it'll look like. I'm trying to make the Bible jump off the pages for people whether it's in hypothetical form or whatever, with real facts, figures, and stats, and armies and units, and all of it, all of it. I try to make the prophecies of the Bible jump off the pages for people through the guise of hypothetical scenarios that actually use real things that exist in this world. If that makes sense to people, I hope they understand what I just said. I use things that exist in this world, this physical, real world, and I use all of these things that exist in this world to make the prophecies of the Bible come to life through hypothetical scenarios. And then I go and painstakingly explain why and how I made those things the way I made them. And I do that largely in the past miscellaneous work that I've made, also some of the Friday shows as well. But, I'm not going to be on here very, very much longer at all because I'm almost done, finally, with this audiobook. I'm almost done with it. I don't have very many parts left to go. I got to do part 27, 28, 29, 30. And also a finale part. And that's really it. And that won't take that much longer to really do. I'm wrapping up some other parts right now, 27 and 28, and I'll get around to reading those pretty soon. So after that, all I'll have left is the 29 and 30 parts, and then the final part, the finale. And then after that, I'm going to do a really long farewell stream, because after that I'll be done with uploading content to YouTube. I'll be, of course, promoting, friends like, Ken over there on Fear No Man channel, and, other friends of mine, maybe Aaron James, or, who knows, Snafu, Snas, Alan over there at Aura, I might promote all my friends' work. LCJC, of course, she makes excellent documentation on certain corruption. I'll put it that way. She does great work on that. So, I'll be sharing out some of my friends' work in the rotation, in my community tab rotation. And the reason I have a rotation, of course, is because, in rotating videos, I still leave space for people to go back to read all the typed out stories that I typed out further back in the community tab. Of course, if you have a laptop or a PC, it's much easier to scroll back and read part by part than it is if you have a phone. So I understand why most people don't read those, because with a phone, which most people tend to use, it's very annoying to scroll all the way back to read those parts. Now, with a PC or a laptop, it's a lot easier to do that, but not everybody uses those, and I understand that. So that's why I made the audiobook, so people can just listen. It's a great thing for long trips, especially. It's literally over 24 hours long. So by the time it's done, it'll be probably 36, maybe 37, 38, I don't know. It'll be up there. Be basically like a good day and a half in length. But that is a really, really good story. It actually turned out, pretty well. I tried not to have expectations too high because I've never read to people before. But you know what? When I listen to each part, when each part is done, it actually don't sound half bad. It's actually all right, because I'm reading it with my voice, but it doesn't sound all that bad. It actually, for the most part, it turned out pretty well. But I'm going to greet everybody in the chat before I get going here. This is my Friday show. I decided to do it a little earlier. Thought more people might come in, but of course, they're probably blocking notifications to people, and of course they're probably blocking the likes too, so that this won't get pushed out to people, but that's fine. That's all good. Let me see who's all in the chat. What's up, Just Man, great to see you, and Big B, and Unorthodox, and Juan, and Efi. Great to see everybody. Well, oh, hey, Mucking Photo. Well, welcome, welcome. Well, good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. So, hope everybody has a blessed day. Doesn't look like very many people seen this, but it's all good. Y'all take care. Y'all be blessed.